Good morning. I am Saini at the University of Canberra. I'm in my weekly conversation with Michelle Grattan about this week in politics. Good morning, Michelle.
Hi, Deep.
Michelle, last week was a memorable week in the Parliament, with the government suffering a historic defeat on the issue of transferring people with medical conditions from our detention centres in Nauru and Manus. Now, this is not something that the government wanted. The Labour and the crossbenchers got together and the bill passed. This is a huge defeat for the government. What are the consequences of it?
The consequences are that the government now, of course, will have to transfer quite a lot of people, and it's saying that that's going to necessitate more detention space, and that it's also claiming to be worried about the fact that people who are accused of crimes might get here. The legislation provides that anyone convicted of a serious crime can be vetoed, but what the government is doing is talking up any possible scares. The question is whether, as the government claims, this will send signals to the people smugglers and they will then press on the borders again. The government is, on the one hand, saying these signals will be sent and that's all Bill Shorten's fault. On the other hand, it's saying we, the government, stand firm on the borders. So there's a conflicting message there. But the government is now trying to turn this defeat into some sort of political advantage by using the boat issue against Labor.
Let's explore that a bit further. So the Prime Minister was very quick to announce that they have contingency plans to deal with this legislation, or the consequences of this legislation. And he is even foreshadowing the possibility of reopening the Christmas Island Detention Centre. Is that likely to happen? Is that necessary?
Well, you can't get any really clear answer from the government about whether this is a full-scale reopening of part of that centre or whether they're just sending in the vacuum cleaners and the mops to clean it out a bit and have it ready if they need to reopen part. They're very cagey on this. I think that they're not quite sure yet what they will do. What Scott Morrison wanted was a headline: we're acting, we're reopening Christmas Island, and that of course is very much associated in people's minds, not just here in Australia but also in the region, with the whole boat issue, boat trade, and unsurprisingly got headlines in the region too. But I think in terms of whether that's necessary, I can't see that it is necessary. Yes, some people will come into detention and in the first instance when they are transferred, but then many will go into the community. And while the government says that space is short in the existing Australian detention facilities, surely it would be more economic to, for example, lease some space, say in Brisbane, near the existing facilities, and deal with what's likely to be a fairly short-term issue anyway. But again, leasing a bit of space would not get the headlines.
The election is imminent. Do you see this becoming a major election issue?
Deep, I don't think we can judge yet whether it will be. The government certainly is trying to make it an election issue with its scare campaign, and it also has those domestic issues to raise scares about Labor as well. But people's views, I think, have changed since 2001 when it was such a big issue, and also boats haven't been coming, so the whole thing has slid down people's radar. Now, if we got a couple of boats on the horizon as a result of all this, then maybe it would become more of an issue. But I think how significant it's going to be will not be clear, at least for a few weeks, till we get opinion polls, focus groups and all those things that parties depend on.
Michelle, let's switch from the potential or fear dangers of those who may want to come to Australia to the behaviour of those who are already here.
In the Parliament.
In the Parliament. You know where I'm going with this. So I'm talking about the Burston Ashby affair. So Senator Burston has accused the One Nation leader, Pauline Hanson, of sexual harassment. Now this is not the first time, they have gone back and forth at each other. And then that eventually cascaded into a scuffle, physical scuffle between Hanson's close aide, James Ashby, and Burston, where there was even blood spilt in the parliament, and Ashby's pass to the parliament has been suspended. There is talk about Burston wiping his blood on Hanson's door. This is an extreme situation in the parliament. What are your thoughts on this? Are we watching something extraordinary happening in our parliament?
Well, one thought is that I think that One Nation is a party beyond embarrassment, because really this whole thing is absurd. You've got a senator in his 70s, a senator in her 60s, these allegations of sexual harassment. It's just, you really feel that these people should grow up, even though it's a long time since they did grow up physically. But will it hurt Hanson? Well, people make the point that Hanson's supporters really deify her, as it were, in a political sense, and whatever shenanigans go on, they don't seem to affect her. It's the ultimate Teflon effect, but it does show that this party really cannot conduct itself in any reasonable way. I think it brings the Senate into disrepute, because out there people just hear senators, and or many people think of it in that way, and they think, well, what are we paying these people for, really?
Well, Michelle, let's put this sorry saga aside for a moment, and let's talk about something more serious. And that is the increasing call for a royal commission into the abuse of people with disabilities. And now, on Thursday, Senate passed a resolution calling for a royal commission. It is now coming to the lower house, and it would be debated there on Monday. Is that likely to pass? Where are we going with this? Are we likely to see a royal commission?
The motion will pass. The government has said that it will let it go through on the voices. As to whether it will lead to something, from the words that Scott Morrison said on Thursday, I think something will come out of this. Whether it's a royal commission, whether it's something short of that is not clear, but I think he is picking up the vibes in the community that when misbehaviour, bad conduct towards individuals comes up, people in the community now want answers, they want evidence, they want people named and shamed, and institutions named and shamed. We've seen this with the banks, we've seen this with the aged care sector, and I think that we're seeing it with the disability sector. So I would think that the government would be wise to produce a robust response to this pressure and try and get ahead of things a bit.
Well, thank you, Michelle. This is to be watched keenly, because I think this is a big issue in the country, and like banks, like elderly, I think this needs to be dealt with.
I think that's certainly right, and I think the government is starting to get that message.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle, and we'll meet again next week.
After, no doubt, another pretty rough and ready week in the Parliament.
That's right, yeah.